Just imagine you are driving on I-4 in a lot of traffic, right? So you're driving, you're in traffic, you're stressed out, maybe you're late for work, and you're already a little upset. And maybe this is like in the future a little bit, and you look to your left, and there's people passing you on the speed lane, and so that's kind of upsetting. You're jealous of these guys that might be on the speed lane. And then someone cuts you off, right? And you almost get into an accident. So we've all had this scenario happen before, and when someone cuts you off, hopefully you avoid the accident. But even before you're even in an accident, you feel heat, right? You might feel a rush of blood and heat, and maybe your skin turns red, and you feel this heat come over you, and you're sitting there and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe this guy almost killed me. So what actually happens when you're feeling that heat and that rush? Because you weren't physically affected, but your body kind of prepared you for what might have been a very traumatic accident. Well, that heat could have been from a stress hormone that's commonly talked about, and it's one of the features of our talk today, called cortisol. And cortisol is a major stress hormone and a major part of stress physiology. Cortisol mainly is used to break down glycogen into glucose. So that's really what cortisol does. That increase in blood sugar, that might be why you feel that heat, is because cortisol is making blood sugar, is increasing blood sugar because it's trying to get energy to the organs and tissues where they need to go. And in the case of an accident, they might need to go to skeletal muscle, or in the case of any stressful situation, usually a physical activity, if you have to defend yourself from an attacker, or you have to, you're in an accident, you have to, brace yourself or heal, or, a physical activity, your body intelligently secretes this hormone, cortisol, because it wants to break down glycogen into glucose, and it wants that for energy. But it has to get that energy to the correct places. So cortisol has kind of dual effects in that it will downregulate what's called insulin receptors in the organs that you don't need the energy. So it'll downregulate your digestive organs, because you don't really, when you're responding to a threat, you don't really need to worry about digesting your lunch. You have to worry about surviving this accident or surviving this fight, right? So you need to get the blood and the blood sugar away from the digestive organs into your muscles so you can respond to whatever's going on. Now, the problem is, so in this scenario, right, we're driving, we're stressed out, we're late for work, we're almost in an accident, and then we get to work. And then what happens when we get to work? We just sit down to start our day. So we sit down at the computer, we start our day, and what happens to all this blood sugar, this glucose that we just made with cortisol, is it just sits there. It goes to the target organs, they're ready, and then instead of responding to a threat, or instead of using this energy, we sit down and we don't do anything. Or we're on the computer, we start answering phones, we do our day, whatever. But meanwhile, we down-regulated insulin receptors in all of our organs and viscera, and we prepared our muscles for this fight that never happened. And so what happens to all that energy? Instead, it gets stored. Because your body is, in chiropractic, we call it innate intelligence. It's innately intelligent. It's not wasteful. It's going to hold on to its resources. And it's not going to waste that energy, but it's going to store it. And it usually stores it as fat. And it usually stores it centripetally, or from hips to thighs. So this is fine in one instance or two instances, but it tends to happen a lot, right? Because it's not just being almost in a car accident that can cause a situation. It can be any stressful situation, perceived or real. To the body, there's no difference. The physiology is the same. So if you're in a dentist chair and you're getting stressed out about the dental work that's about to happen, your body starts preparing for a threat. The same thing happens if you're having an argument with someone and you're getting upset, you know, or if you're just stressed out about your job or a relationship or whatever. The body doesn't know the difference. It's preparing in the same way. And so we keep preparing the body to almost get into these fights, right? But then not getting into these fights, and then not using the energy that we created, creating fat, and then down-regulating insulin receptors, which can lead to chronic disease. The stress response actually can lead to every single chronic disease in our society today. It can contribute to cancer, heart disease, stroke, diabetes. And it's strange because your body, and in chiropractic we say it's innately intelligent. It's always responding in an intelligent way. It's doing what it needs to do to respond to the threat. Because perceived or no, you actually need this energy to deal with the stressful environment. So the way to be healthy is to change the environment, right? So you always want to put your detective cap on and look for what is stressing you out, right? And try and fix that. And it's not always obvious or easy to do that. You know, if you have a stressful job, you can't just quit your job or whatever. If, you're married to someone, you're trying to make it work, or you have to fight the same traffic every single day. I don't know. But there are healthy and unhealthy ways to deal with stress. All right, let's go over a little bit of the effects of cortisol. So, for one thing, cortisol not only down-regulates insulin receptors, it affects an area of your brain called the amygdala, which affects kind of your emotional memory. Which is why if you ever burn your hand on a stove, your body remembers burning your hand on the stove because it is so deep in your memory. Anything that's ever hurt you, it is in your emotional memory, not just your actual memory. It's very easy to access those memories. It does so at the expense of long-term memory, stimulates the amygdala, downregulates another area of the brain called the hippocampus, which controls your long-term memory. And so this chronic stress response can also lead to what we commonly refer to as ADHD, where you can't pay attention and you can't store thoughts long-term, and can wreak havoc on you, that way, on your brain and, emotionally. The other thing that it intelligently does, the stress response, is it downregulates the immune system, specifically something called cellular-mediated immunity. And I'm going to write that here. So we're going to downregulate cellular-mediated immunity. You can almost read that, right? So the reason it's doing that is because you have to survive the attack, the perceived threat or the actual threat, to actually deal with the things that you normally deal with, which is the bacterial stressors or whatever that's in your environment. So and we see this all the time, right? With anything stressful that later makes you sick. For instance, students that are studying for finals, right? So, and you guys are all engineers, so you all know, right? How many of you have had finals week, right? You take all of your tests and you pass, you pass all your tests, whatever, and then it's after you were studying that you get sick. Or you notice it, in whatever project you're working on. You get through whatever you're getting through, and then you get sick. Or, you take a vacation, and even though the vacations are fun, they can also be a little bit stressful. And when you get home from the vacation, then you get sick. Well, the reason is because when you were in whatever stressful situation you were in, hopefully you didn't have a stressful vacation, but studying for finals or working on your project or whatever was going on, your body gets you through it, but at the expense of your immune system. And it does that because, well, cortisol specifically downregulates T cells, which is a major immune function, but more specifically, it's dealing with two parts of your nervous system called the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. Have you guys heard about this stuff before? Maybe? No? Okay. So you have these two nervous systems, basically. If you look at the nervous system, it's almost like there's two of them. And there's the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. And one is most commonly referred to as fight or flight. You guys have heard of that, right? And then the other one is usually referred to rest and digest. So one is kind of healthier than the other. If you're always in fight or flight, you're not going to be healthy, you're going to get sick. It's going to lead to really every chronic disease that affects our country, or everybody. Stroke, cancer, heart disease, diabetes. The other one is kind of what you live in and want to be in to be healthy. So looking at the functions of the sympathetic nervous system, basically the two work in tandem. When one is going, the other isn't. So when you're stressed out and you're in sympathetic mode, you're in fight or flight, you are in what we call a catabolic state. You're breaking things down to respond to stressors. Versus the parasympathetic nervous system, you're in an anabolic state where you're building things up and kind of growing, and being healthy, which is where we all want to be. So I'm just going to list a few functions of the sympathetic nervous system real quick, and then we'll talk about them. So if you're in fight or flight, you are diverting blood flow away from your viscera and to skeletal muscle to respond to a stress. You're inhibiting cellular mediated immunity, and you're increasing your heart rate. And what commonly happens is your pupils dilate to take in more light because you want to see whatever's happening. Versus the parasympathetic nervous system, which we call rest and digest, where you're bringing blood from the skeletal muscle to the organs to digest food and make things, which is good. You're promoting cellular immunity, which you're promoting your immune system. And you constrict the pupils and lens. You don't need to take in as much light. Also, we're all adults here, right? The parasympathetic nervous system is involved in the erection of genitals. And if you're in the parasympathetic state, it's going to promote a healthy sex drive. If you're in the sympathetic nervous system, it's going to deregulate that. It's not going to promote that, and it can affect you in that way. We notice, or research shows us that movement of the body and movement of the spine actually decreases the stress response. It actually inhibits the sympathetic nervous system. So, and you've probably all noticed that when you exercise, you feel relief. It gives you relief from your stress. You're like, oh man, I was so stressed. You went and ran a mile or whatever, or you went to the gym, and you feel better. You feel de-stressed. Well, there's an actual physiological reason for that. Is because you're actually inhibiting that part of your nervous system. The way that chiropractic can affect this is if the spine is stuck, you are then unable to engage in that healthy physiology, that movement. So even by exercising or even by moving your spine or moving your body, you might not be benefiting from exercise like you normally would if you had a healthy and moving spine. And we call that joint fixation, we call it subluxation. And it speaks to a larger category, what we call nociception. And nociception is basically the detection of noxious stimuli, right? And this may or may not be conscious. You may or may not be consciously aware of it because your body is kind of constantly fighting a war, right? We're like bathing in bacteria right now and fighting it off. Or we're digesting food, or our cells are dividing and making more cells. There's all these different things going on that you're not even aware of. And the bad things that you're not aware of are called nociception, right? When you become consciously aware of nociception, we call that pain. So nociception can lead to pain. Kind of the opposite of nociception is something that we call proprioception. And the two, much like the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system, work in tandem. So when proprioceptors are being stimulated, nociceptors are being downregulated, which is kind of the mechanism by which movement or exercise or chiropractic adjustments can inhibit the sympathetic nervous system and decrease the stress response. So exercise is an excellent way to deal with stress. Is it a good idea or not a good idea to exercise when you're sick? If you're sick, you feel like you're coming down with a cold or flu, how many people think it's a good idea?
Bad idea for other people.
I think if you have a fever, you should.
Yeah?
Other than that.
All right, so...
I think it depends upon the degree of how much you exercise in that period.
Okay. Well, maybe you've noticed that if you're sick and you go to exercise, you feel better, right?
Yeah.
So like you're like, oh, you know, I'm coming down, I got a sore throat or whatever, my sinuses are congested, and then you go exercise and you're like, I feel great, right? And it's this kind of counterintuitiveness that can be to your detriment. You should never exercise when you're sick. If you feel like you're getting sick, you shouldn't exercise. If you are sick, you shouldn't exercise, even though you feel better when you exercise when you're sick. Why? Because when you're exercising, you're engaging the stress response and you're downregulating that cellular mediated immunity. You're shutting off your immune system. And even though you feel better after you exercise, the reason that you're feeling better is because you shut off the mechanism that was fighting the infection. And so while you're exercising, the infection is getting worse. You feel better at the moment, but then you feel worse. And it's this type of activity that can prolong an infection. And then you hear people saying, well, I've been sick for 2 weeks, or I've been sick for 2 months. Anytime you shut down your immune system from fighting the infection, you're going to get worse. You're going to give the infection an opportunity to make more of itself. The same is true for medication. Anytime you stop your symptoms from occurring, you're also stopping your body from fighting that infection. I definitely implore you not to exercise when you're sick, and if you can, avoid some of those medications that might make you feel better, but might make you sick longer. That can also affect you. And yeah, it's really the timing that makes a difference. If you are increasing blood sugar and then not using it, or downgrading those insulin receptors, that's when you're leading to chronic disease. Because when you get back into the appropriate situations, then things might not work correctly. For instance, once it's time to get blood sugar back into those cells, the cells have been so desensitized. If you've been under so much chronic stress, that's really the mechanism by which diabetes occurs. It's cells not wanting to intake sugar, and then you develop these problems or these symptoms. High blood sugar can be a medical emergency. Hyperglycemia or hypoglycemia can be a medical emergency, and then so to avoid that, you go through all the physiologies of physiology of diabetes, which is bad news. So recognizing when you're in the sympathetic mode is important. If you know that you're in these stressful situations, you do want to focus more on moving your body, moving your spine, and that's going to help you to stay healthy. If you're in these stressful situations and you are not exercising, you're not moving your spine, you are going to be moving towards chronic diseases. And I list cancer in that as part of a chronic disease. It's because of the effects with cortisol in the immune system. When the immune system isn't working right, it can be a mechanism for cancer. Your immune cells can make too many cells and develop blood cancers or tumors. You can develop heart disease if you're constantly secreting adrenaline, noradrenaline. These are also stress hormones in addition to cortisol. Let's see. Changes like increased heart rate and blood pressure, vasoconstriction. Now, these are intelligent responses for the stress response. If you need to get resources to the appropriate organs quickly, you need to increase blood pressure. But medicine looks at increased blood pressure as a disease and gives you medication just to decrease blood pressure. Well, what happens when you decrease blood pressure artificially? Those organs and tissues aren't getting the resources that they needed. So you get side effects like fatigue and anxiety and depression, and then you get medications for those. The stress response can also decrease serotonin levels, which are your basic neurotransmitters, which can lead to those depression, fatigue, anxiety, memory learning, decreased sex drive, and accelerated aging. And there's also a relationship between increased cortisol and osteoporosis. So the list continues. There's probably no study of any chronic disease that doesn't include cortisol in the stress response. What we've noticed, in my chiropractic practice also is that chiropractic adjustments can have a big effect on the stress response. And it's usually not the first thing that people come to me for. People come to me for neck pain, back pain, and headaches. And it's usually during care that, or during the history, that if I get to know that someone is really stressed out, that we can begin to address some lifestyle things that is going to help with the outcome, not only with their neck pain, back pain, and headaches, but just with their wellness lifestyle. And that's kind of what we try and do, in my office, is transition people from this stress state or this pain state into like a wellness type state, wellness type lifestyle. So that's basically what I wanted to talk to you about today, and hopefully you have a better understanding, or at least maybe more interest in stress physiology, and you can think about this a little bit differently. But if you want more information, I just wrote my website up there. It's just orlandochiropractic.com. That's our office phone number. You can call or text that number if you have any questions or you want to make an appointment for chiropractic care. So I'll be around. I'm going to grab a sandwich. So if you guys have any questions, you can let me know. And maybe I'll come back and we'll do more like wellness talks if you guys will have me back. All right.
Well, thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.